Amazon! What are you doing? Hi. There was coughing and a bit of static. Reactor shielding has failed. We've got a fire in 3 power junctions. I've dumped all we have left to engines. Long live the caster! Long live freedom. Long live the Suvakovs. Amazon, back down. We can divert emergency work crews. Amazon! Amazon! Respond, damn it! Just as the ship collided with the hostile super dreadnought, the table changed back to the bridge, and he saw Andromeda on her knees now before her chair. How many? How fucking many? She gasped out, and Cassis knew his mouth was hanging open by now as he saw her openly sobbing. There was no calm and collected mood or maniacal grin. This was the same woman as the self-styled Baroness who had captured him. The Knight's Hospitaller is breaking up, sir. Only 2 battlecruisers left now. 1. Sierra is launching. Sierra reports full success. All Congo ships in the immediate area are dead or dying, sir. Andromeda reached up then, dragging herself from her knees back into her command seat, face buried in her hands. Full fleet status report, she muttered out. All frigates are lost. 23 destroyers lost. 12 light cruisers, 10 heavy cruisers. All dreadnoughts, 3 battlecruisers and 2 battleships. Able, Bravo, Delta, Juliet, Lima, and Kilo bomber wings are all gone. Alligator, Albatross, Ant, Bird, Badger, Bat, Crab, and Dolphin fighter wings are all gone, reporting roughly 25% losses from all other bomber wings and 33% from all other fighter wings. Carriers are untouched. All boarding parties have been neutralized with 20% loss to Marines and Commandos. Gunnery reports 23% loses. Engineering reports 15% loses. Reactor 2 is damaged. Hangar 1 is gone. Main gun fully operational. At the end of that, Andromeda slowly drew herself up. Prepare fleet will move to engage the rimward arm first, and then... She paused as she looked up at the screen. Sir! New contact reported jumping into the system. Fuck. Reinforcements? Look at the size of that ship. Half the table was taken up by a shot of a massive ship, easily rivaling the conglomerate super dreadnoughts in tonnage, but it looked completely different. Cassis didn't think it looked prepared for combat at all. It was sort of like a carrier, but different. Sir, we're being hailed. That is a troop carrier. It has no weapons, they're surrendering. Surrendering? This battle isn't done. What the fuck do they think we can do? Andromeda muttered aloud. Ah, sir, it's beginning to turn even as they announce their surrender. It's trying to jump away! All guns prepare to open fire! Andromeda demanded, but the human who had been next to her for most of the battle spoke up. Belay that order! Then he turned to her. Andromeda, that's an unarmed troop carrier. They're surrendering to us. If they keep on their course, they'll just run into debris from the battle. They aren't going anywhere! The rules of war dictate we must accept their surrender. And do what? She asked. Where do we put them? Look at the size of that ship. There's easily a few 100,000 soldiers on that beast. Where do we put them? On Castor. Yes, that's brilliant. We'll just let the Congo soldiers land on our capital. That can't possibly backfire. They have no weapons. We can't fire on them. Sir, another contact on screen. Andromeda and the man looked up as another of those massive ships jumped into the system, nearly colliding with the other one. There's more? Andromeda gasped. All guns prepare to open fire. No, belay that order. All gunners, this is XO Thomas Ingram, do not fire on those vessels. They are surrendering to us and unarmed. Ingram, I am captain of this vessel and commander of this fleet. I'm giving you a direct command to order our gunners to open fire, Andromeda was shouting. You're mad. They are surrendering. It's in violation of the rules of war, he shouted back at her. Those are soldiers intent on conquering our capital, killing our people, and enslaving those who survive. We are not going to keep them as prisoners. We have the remains of a fleet that's still roughly twice our size bearing down on us as we speak. We kill them now! Sir, a third ship has just shown up. How many fucking ships are there? Andromeda screamed. Open fire! Open fire right now. They are filthy fucking Congos. They're here to kill us, so kill them first. I won't do it, the executive officer screamed in her face. Vice Admiral Ingram, are you disobeying a direct order from your commanding officer? She finally asked, and Cassis heard that edge to her voice as he gulped. Yes. Yes, I am. And with me here, I'll never let the gunners fire. You're crazy. It's murder. I won't have it, the officer shouted back into her face. Then, in a swift motion, she pulled her sidearm free from her hip and shot the man in the head. He looked surprised as he collapsed to the floor. The bridge was completely silent after that, and Andromeda looked down at his body before quietly speaking. Cassus almost couldn't hear her and certainly needed help from the words being projected before his eyes. By my authority as captain and commander of this fleet, I hereby find you guilty of treason in battle and sentence your execution to be carried out immediately. She holstered her sidearm then and collapsed into her chair. Sir, another ship has jumped into the system. Andromeda stared up at the screen for a moment. The first ship that had jumped was now almost turned around. Main gun target the first ship. Turn the starboard side to face the jump point. All gunners are to fire at will on the Congo troop carriers. Draw in the rest of the fleet in a defensive position around the Pride of Castor. All strike craft return to hangars to rearm and reload. The rest of the invasion fleet will be on us soon. As Cassus watched, the Retribution opened fire on that first massive troop carrier. It didn't take long for it to start to break apart, obviously not designed to handle that sort of fire. He was a little confused by the debris that came tumbling out until he realized they must be bodies, hundreds of thousands of bodies. Any estimates on troop capacity? Andromeda asked quietly. Sir, our current estimate is anywhere from 400,000 to 500,000, a tech replied, and Andromeda just kept watching the screen. Soon the second began to break apart, and that's when she started to laugh. Cassus felt the hair rise up on the back of his neck as he watched her on the screen. The tears still stained her cheeks and streamed down her face, but the sobs had stopped, and in their place laughter. Another ship jumped into system, and already began to get hit with the debris and bodies from the ships that had already jumped in. Andromeda's laugh grew harder and louder then. The third was destroyed, then the fourth, but a sixth just jumped in. Her laugh just got more maniacal and delirious as the fifth was destroyed. Then the sixth, but a seventh jumped in right after. Then the table went black. I can't watch anymore. Cassus looked up at the projector in the ceiling as he heard that human yet metallic voice of the Admiral speak up. I can't... How many? Cassus finally asked. Gibbs had wanted to end the war as quickly as possible, Junko started saying, and Cassus noticed the girl had been crying herself at some point. She sniffed and wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Faster than light comm relays hadn't been established, but he had given commands to the troop carriers to enter the system at about the time he figured they'd be finished circling Castor. Then he'd engage Admiral Suvakov and the troop carriers would move in. If Suvakov focused on the troop carriers, it would let Gibbs destroy his fleet faster. If he focused on the fleet, the troop carriers could land on the planet faster. Castor had a population of about 1 billion people, so he expected that the first wave would need about 20 million soldiers to perform a landing. Cassus stared at her for a moment, and then the figures began to click in his head. 20 million! He exclaimed and looked back at the table that was still black. She just ordered the execution of 20 million soldiers who couldn't fight back. They were a threat to Castor. If she let them live, they'd be back with another fleet. They were soldiers. That was the voice of the Admiral speaking in Desvian, which threw Cassus off for a moment. She realized the only way to truly stall the invasion was to wipe out their first invasion force. The rest of the fleet came at her in pieces, desperately trying to reach her and save the ships that had no idea they were jumping into a slaughter. More Confederate ships were lost, but not a single conglomerate ship survived. This was such a blow to morale and resources it took a year for another invasion fleet to be prepared. Long enough for Andromeda to assemble the colony ship and let as many Confederates as possible run to the edges of known space and try and disappear. But why? Cassus asked. Why fight like this? Those frigates and bombers and more, so many were so willing to give up their own lives in this battle. They weren't nobles. They weren't aristocrats. You've told me how you're made of common people. Why did they do this? You were a democracy fighting a democracy. Why? Why fight so hard for so long? He gasped as he struggled with the concept. Why any of this? Junko translated that to Stahl, who spoke in English, and had Junko translate it to Desvian for Cassus. He says it might be hard for you to understand because you never had a choice. But we did. We were born free. We had a voice in our government. We had a hand in shaping our nation. We could hold office and travel freely. You might think it was the same between our nations, but there was an important difference. They weren't going to give us a choice. We never asked to be a part of their conglomerate. We never asked to join them, and they demanded it of us by force. They are democratic, but all their governors, all the powerful officials came from their core worlds. Not a single governor who ruled the frontier systems came from the frontier systems. Since the core worlds held so many people, they made laws that everyone had to obey. Stahl shrugged for a moment and then kept talking as Junko translated still. There were never going to be enough of us to vote for a return of many of the things we considered to be unquestionable rights that they disagreed with. We would become a minority, robbed of our voice and forced to obey the laws of people who lived across the galaxy. On every single conquest before the conglomerate had marched their victorious armies through the old capital city of their vanquished foe. They stole their art and replaced their leaders and began to replace their culture. When they finally took Castor a year later, all of our art, plus many of our artists and cultural leaders, were aboard the colony ship. It's a fundamental difference between our peoples. They think that humanity is great when it is the same, all equal without exception. We believe we are great because of diversity. Our disagreements and differing opinions are what make us. We would stand tall, free, and unconquered. Or we would die. Junko was quiet then as Cassis realized how she'd phrased all of that. You speak as if you are one of them, but are you not a Congo by birth? Junko opened her mouth to reply and then closed her mouth and seemed to think on it. I am by birth, but I think not by choice. Not anymore. She glanced at the table, which Cassis then waved to. Seeing that made you believe in their cause more? It just made some things fit better in my head. About Andromeda. About what we're doing. Why she's her. This ship. It's now called the Retribution. You know this. But what you probably didn't know? Since she first renamed it, she had work crews begin to etch the names of every Confederate who's fallen in the war, and since on the hull. Cassis blinked at that. He knew the size of the ship, but the amount of dead. Are they done? He asked, and Junko shook her head. They might not have any more names at this moment, but there's still space on the hull, and Andromeda makes sure every recruit who has ever fallen will also get their name on the hull, along with all the rest. The conglomerate, we lost 20 million soldiers and maybe another million sailors in that battle. We lost millions more throughout the war. For what? To conquer a people who wanted to be left alone? She got silent again, and then shrugged. On that day, Cassis looked up as the Admiral spoke once more. I was able to watch, but I could not talk. I did not know how yet. I was first filled with pride at how my daughter commanded the fleet, then fear for her well-being, and then fear for her mental health. I could see her starting to crack. The loss of life she had to endure as commander. It is not easy. It's never easy. And she had to try and shoulder a burden greater than almost any commander has suffered, almost immediately. I saw her kill my best friend for disobeying her orders. And then I saw her die. The girl I knew. The sweet, joyful girl who was so much like her mother. She died that day as she watched her gunners destroy those troop carriers. And in her place was born the pirate with a goal in mind. Find us a new home. I no longer know how her mind works. I no longer expect her path to be anything other than bloody and violent. But I know, if it's the only thing I know, that she will make it happen. Cassis stood there in silence. Junko sniffed and rubbed a few more tears from the corner of her eyes. Stahl was staring at the table, looking solemn and sad. Cassis was quite seriously at a loss for words. Andromeda had first been ripped from the belly of her dead mother, inside of a dead ship, killed by the conglomerate. Then her father had been shot and turned into a machine, his brain living in a jar by them. Then she had to command a fleet to stop their invasion of her home, a battle that cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of her countrymen, at the end of a war that had claimed millions. He no longer wondered why she was insane. He just wasn't sure if he should fear her, pity her, or hug her. He looked over at Junko and was about to talk when the door opened and they all looked over to see Andromeda in the doorway, her power armor on, and a big smile on her face. Well, look at you three gloomy folks. Did someone's pet die? Come on, we're about to invade that pirate system you told me about, Cassis. This should be fun. We're all headed up to the bridge. Cassis blinked a little, and then looked at the others for a few seconds before moving to follow the pirate captain. Do you think you are go to hell? He asked in English, and the pirate laughed. It wasn't the same laughter on the bridge, this was more friendly and amused. Oh, I know I am, baby. That's why I have so much fun! I'm planning on going to hell in style. Get my name on the worst sinners in history board. I'll be famous. It'll make it easier for me to take over once I get there and rule hell. Why do you ask? She set her hands on her hips and looked down at him. Cassis thought it over for a moment and shrugged. Maybe I come with. He didn't really believe in the human hell as he'd heard it explained, but seeing Andromeda laugh now and smile made him feel somehow better. That's the spirit. All right, now to the bridge. She turned and began to walk down the hall, sort of dancing as she moved to some song in her head that no one else could hear. Cassis sighed and began to follow his captor. He never thought he'd feel sympathy for a pirate, but here he was. As he walked after her, he considered where he'd thought his life was going before that fateful day of his capture, and where it was going now, and realized that life never goes as planned, and is often stranger than one ever expects. So perhaps he owed it to himself to have more fun.